Hello and welcome back to Space Atlas. I am your host, the voice of reason in a scientific community that seems determined to keep its head buried in the sand. Today, we need to have a very serious conversation about the interstellar interloper known as 3I Atlas. We are looking at an object that is defying the standard models and misbehaving in ways that should make every astronomer sit up and take notice. But instead of clarity, we are getting silence, obfuscation, and the usual runaround from the powers that be. There has been a tremendous amount of chatter regarding 3I Atlas for months now, bubbling under the surface of the mainstream news cycle. The latest development involves a Freedom of Information Act request submitted to the United States Central Intelligence Agency regarding this object. You would expect a standard denial or a statement saying they don't track space rocks, but that is not what happened. The CIA replied with the infamous Glomar response, stating they can neither confirm nor deny the existence of documents pertaining to 3I Atlas. Let's pause and think about the implications of an intelligence agency using that specific phrasing for a comet. This is classic cloak and dagger tactics designed to mess with your head. You have to learn to ignore the mind games because they always do this from a position of manufactured authority. They want you to think, whoa, maybe they know something huge, or perhaps they are just checking it out like the rest of us. My mindset has always been that if they aren't truthful organizations to begin with, you shouldn't waste your energy parsing their non-denials. It is a distraction from the actual orbital dynamics and physical reality of this interstellar visitor. We need to focus on the hard data, which tells us that 3I Atlas has been blasting plasma and dust across our solar system for months. This object showed anomalous activity the moment it was first picked up by our sensors. When we look back at the archival data going back to May or even April, we saw signs of outgassing at distances where comets simply should not be active. We have seen solar system comets do this occasionally, but for an interstellar object, it is highly irregular. Then, of course, we have the matter of the forward-facing tail, the sunward projection that has baffled the white lab coats. This feature existed pre-perihelion during its closest approach to the sun, and it has persisted post-perihelion. It is effectively moving with a structure that defies the solar wind, maintaining this feature after a high-velocity slingshot around our star. As we can see with the latest imaging, 3I Atlas has engaged in a tremendous amount of gas, plasma, and dust dispersal. This is not a quiet rock tumbling through the void, it is an active, volatile body spewing material through distinct jets. Many amateur astronomers have imaged these jets, revealing a changing structure that hints at a complex internal mechanism. Our best data indicates that 3I Atlas is rotating roughly every 15 to 16 hours. We should roll with that number until better telemetry comes along, but it fits the visual evidence of the spiral jet structures. While jetting activity is common in comets, the combination of high rotation and the sunward-facing tail creates a unique dispersal pattern. It is not exceptionally bizarre if you look at it in isolation, but when you stack the anomalies, the picture gets complicated. You put all of it together, and what you have is a tremendous volume of dust, gas, and plasma being ejected into the interplanetary medium. This matters because Earth has a history of passing through the jet streams and dust trails of comets. When we interact with these meteor jet streams, the results can be visually spectacular and occasionally terrifying. We can look back to the historic event of 1833 for a prime example of what happens when Earth intersects a dense debris field. That year, we experienced a meteor storm that reached rates of over 250,000 meteors per hour. I have reworked the original graphics from that era to give you a modern sense of the scale, but the accounts are bone-chilling. People were flooding into churches, falling to their knees, and praying to God to save them because the sky was literally falling. If you were to look up and see 300,000 streaks of light every single hour, you would think the apocalypse had arrived. It wasn't just a sporadic shooting star here and there, it was a non-stop waterfall of cosmic fire. The common explanation is that this was the Leonid meteor stream, associated with the comet 55P/Tempel-Tuttle. You can research that specific comet if you want to verify the official narrative. However, there are aspects of the 1833 event that remain bizarre and technically unexplained by standard orbital mechanics. The math generally checks out for the Leonids, but it is entirely possible that another factor was at play. The eyewitness accounts describe meteors coming straight down, like rain, rather than streaking across the sky at an angle. If you have a comet flying by, or if Earth is passing through a dust stream, you expect the entry vectors to be angular, but in 1833, the graphic representations and written records insist on a vertical descent. This suggests that perhaps something exploded directly above the Earth, raining debris straight down into the atmosphere. There are many theories exploring this, challenging the idea that it was solely the result of a comet's swing-by. Why does history matter right now? It matters because 3I Atlas is performing a close approach to Jupiter in March. This interstellar traveler is going to be interacting directly with the king of planets. It is bringing its massive cloud of dust, plasma, and gas right into the Jovian system at the peak of its density. At the same time, Earth is going to be interacting with the remnant trail of this object. We are potentially looking at a dust storm event in March and April of this year. I have been wanting to make this documentary for a while because the implications are significant. I am going to do my best to present all the different angles, but realize this is an evolving situation. I will definitely be releasing more information on this as time goes on, because the dynamics are incredibly complex. But let's look at the orbital chart for March 22nd. 3I Atlas is actually going to be at its closest approach to Jupiter on the 17th of March. We can verify this by zooming over to the Jovian system in our simulation software. It gets within about 0.2 astronomical units of the gas giant. As some of you astute observers know, that is right outside the Hill sphere of Jupiter. The Hill sphere is the zone of gravitational dominance, where Jupiter's gravity overpowers the pull of the Sun. Jupiter has dozens upon dozens of moons with irregular orbits that extend far out into this region. So 3I Atlas will be passing uncomfortably close to this chaotic gravitational environment. It is carrying all this gas and dust, essentially dragging a dirty halo through Jupiter's backyard. We have to go back to the data processed by Tony Scarato to understand the morphology of this coma. This is official Hubble data, processed to reveal the hidden structures within the glow. If you look at the timestamps, we have data ranging from the 30th of November to the 27th of December. When you look at the raw preview graphic, you see the basic fuzzy image that Hubble captured. But what Tony did was apply a rotational gradient filter to the imagery. This filter effectively removes the circular features, the standard coma glow that obscures the details. For the most part, the coma around 3I Atlas appears circular to the naked eye, but once you strip away that uniform glow, you start to image the distinct jets. The difference between the November 30th data and the December 27th data is striking. We see a clear evolution in the structure of the outflow before and after Earth's closest approach. There was an equalization between the jets, suggesting a stabilization of the rotational axis. 3I Atlas has basically been spinning like a garden sprinkler, spewing matter everywhere across the inner solar system. If we go back to the sky chart and reverse time, we can trace the trajectory of this dispersal. We can see its approach to the inner solar system and its close flyby of Mars. On October 3rd, it hit its perihelion, the point of closest approach to the Sun. During this entire inbound leg, it was getting more and more energized by solar radiation. Multiple solar storms slammed into the object, stripping material and ionizing the coma. It really became active during this phase, which is exactly what we would expect from a volatile rich body. You have to consider the physics of the velocity vectors here. At perihelion, this thing is moving at a staggering 68 kilometers per second. By the time it reaches Jupiter, it will still be traveling at roughly 66 kilometers per second. All those particles being emitted from 3I Atlas are initially traveling at that host velocity. However, once a particle is jetted out, it acquires a new velocity vector. This new vector adds to or subtracts from the original motion of the nucleus. The main host object, 3I Atlas, is on a hyperbolic trajectory headed out of the solar system. It is not coming back, as far as our current orbital models can predict. But if something is jetted off with sufficient force at a right angle, the dynamics change. It could jet off in one direction or in the exact opposite direction. If the jet points backward along the trajectory, the ejected dust still has momentum, but less than the nucleus. If the jet points forward, the dust might even exceed the velocity of 3I Atlas for a time. Remember that 3I Atlas had this sunward-facing tail that confused everyone. This means some of the material has been ejected against its standard velocity vector of motion. This material is effectively moving slower than the main body of 3I Atlas. If you eject material slowly enough relative to the Sun, it can actually enter into a circular orbit. Is that possible in this specific case? Is the jetting action strong enough to circularize the dust orbits? That is a massive unknown, and anyone telling you they know for sure is lying. But because we have perpendicular and oppositional jetting, we know the debris field is expanding. Some of this stuff is going to be spreading out and lagging behind the main nucleus. If we move our simulation forward in time once more, we see the inevitable intersection. Earth passes into the zone where some of this decelerated material is drifting. This brings us to a critical concept known as the Poynting-Robertson effect. This is a phenomenon where solar radiative pressure affects dust grains of a specific size. The photons from the sun literally push against the dust, altering its orbit over time. For a grain made of low-density material, like hydrous silicates or water ice, the effect is significant. If the grains are metallic, with a high density of 7 or 8 grams per cubic centimeter, the effect is different. There is a balance point where the outward pressure of light equals the inward pull of gravity, but if they have an outgoing velocity from the jet, they might shoot out of the system entirely. However, the Poynting-Robertson effect acts as a drag force. It causes small grains to lose orbital angular momentum and spiral slowly into the sun. The closer these grains are to the star, the stronger this radiative braking force becomes. It drops off according to the inverse square law, but in the inner solar system, it is potent. Some grains will be large enough that the radiative effect is negligible, but others will be trapped in a death spiral, migrating inward across Earth's orbit. If the dust doesn't have much velocity difference relative to the solar system, it spirals in. If it has a high relative velocity, like the debris from an interstellar object, the dynamics are more chaotic. It is looking like we are going to have a one-time pass of this gas, dust, and plasma. The question that keeps me up at night is, how much of it is going to interact with our atmosphere? It depends entirely on the dispersal pattern. If the jets acted like a shotgun, spreading the load over a wide area, we could get hit by a significant front. If it didn't spread out that much, we might just see some very minor atmospheric effects. There is going to be a huge distribution across the size of the grains and their chemical composition. Are they metallic? Are they silicate? Are they hydrous clumps of frozen volatiles, like CO2 or methane? We have a massive distribution across all these different physical characteristics, but we have a clue, and it comes from the spectroscopic data. We know there is a tremendous amount of nickel in the coma of 3I Atlas. I suspect these are going to be largely metallic grains, which changes the game completely. If there is enough of a draw inwards by the sun, these heavy metallic grains could cross our path. This makes the interaction window in March and April incredibly interesting. We know that there is dust throughout the solar system. It is not a vacuum. Saturn, for instance, has these massive rings made up of dust grains, pebbles, and ice. Saturn has held onto this stuff for eons through gravitational shepherding. We also have the zodiacal dust, which we can see clearly in long exposure astrophotography. If you look at a multi-composite image of the night sky, you see a faint, triangular glow. That is the zodiacal light, sunlight reflecting off interplanetary dust. So if someone tells you all the dust from 3I Atlas is just going to blow away, they are wrong. The Poynting-Robertson effect and the presence of the zodiacal cloud tell us otherwise. I did some digging into the physics of this, because you cannot trust the standard encyclopedias. Wikipedia, as we all know, can be edited to skew the truth or hide anomalies. You have to be smart and verify the raw physics when you are researching these topics. I input the base characteristics of these potential dust grains into a physics model to see what would happen. Because the velocity of the 3I Atlas debris is so different from the normal zodiacal dust, the interaction is unique. The solar wind also plays a massive role in this dance. Here is the really interesting part. Dust grains in space hold an electric charge. When a dust grain is exposed to the harsh environment of the vacuum, it accumulates voltage. If it is being hit by sunlight, the photoelectric effect kicks in. That charge can skyrocket up to hundreds or even thousands of volts positive. If the grain is in darkness, the voltage drops and becomes more electron-based, essentially negative. But we know there is a ton of sunlight hitting these grains because they are in the inner solar system. They are floating there between Earth and Mars, bathed in UV radiation. They are highly charged, which means they form electrostatic bundles. They don't necessarily have to disperse out like a cloud of smoke. We don't have all the physics for this, But charged dust behaves like a plasma. If we get these electrostatic bundles to exist within the trail of 3I Atlas, we could be hit by a dust bullet. I don't know if it will be a diffuse cloud or a series of dense charged pockets. The calculations effectively suggest that this is a one-time pass through the solar system. The relative velocity is quite a bit higher than the native material in our neighborhood, but we are likely to get hit by it because those massive jets were active for so long. We know the composition of 3I Atlas fairly well because we have done the spectroscopy. We have confirmed the presence of water from this data. But the ultraviolet data is the key, showing faint, wispy structures extending away from the coma. These structures are interpreted as dust being released directly from the nucleus. We already suspected this, but now we have confirmation that the ultraviolet data shows fine detail. These observations are consistent with features we see on comets in our own solar system. This suggests that the dynamics we have learned from local comets likely apply to this interstellar visitor. It appears that this electrostatic dust storm is going to be a factor in March and April. I find it very suspicious that this is exactly the time Jupiter has its closest flyby with the object. I really see this as representing an interstellar download. We should be ready to expect the unexpected, because we are dealing with variables we have never seen before. I don't expect it to be like the meteor storm of 1833. For that to happen, the main body would have to pass much closer to the Earth. But don't be surprised if weird things happen in our night sky or around the Earth's magnetosphere. It is also the beginning of the zodiacal season with the spring equinox. The March equinox is always a time of heightened geometric alignment. There are just a lot of different little clues that suggest March and April are going to be quite dynamic. I think we could see a sudden acceleration of energetic events here on Earth. This object is just one representation of a larger reality manifestation occurring at this moment. We have 3I Atlas getting very close to Jupiter, and this brings up a fascinating point raised by Avi Loeb. He did the calculations and looked into the specific moons involved. It turns out that Euphum, the irregular moon of Jupiter, is the closest body to the trajectory of 3I Atlas. Avi Loeb mentions how in Greek mythology, Euphum is the spirit of praise and good omen. She is the granddaughter of Zeus, which is the Greek equivalent of Jupiter. Avi suggests that this is a good sign, a cosmic wink from the universe. If we are speaking about the archetypal signatures of this close approach, I don't think this is something to fear. We don't even know if anything will manifest physically on the ground. It is not like we are guaranteed to see a meteor storm. But these energies can be very subtle and operate on the level of the electric field. We know that surrounding the Earth, we have the Kordylewski clouds. These are massive clouds of electrostatic dust sitting in the orbital resonance points of the Moon. These clouds are highly elusive, but they have been observed by different organizations over decades. We have limited observations, but the evidence for their existence is solid. There are a lot of interesting ideas out there about the Kordylewski clouds. Each single grain has a voltage, and it is rotating and oscillating within the field. There aren't just billions or trillions of them, there is an unimaginable amount. They are all connected together with their shared electric field, creating a complex network. Some really complex dynamics emerge from that kind of connectivity. We see with the human brain what results from the complex neural connections we possess. It gives life to my ability to speak to you here and your ability to process these concepts. We see what happens when we keep decreasing the size of computer chips. Going down to the nanometer scale, packing in more transistors, allows computers to do incredible things. And now we have artificial intelligence, which is essentially a function of complexity. It is simply a matter of how many information gates you have. If you have a quantum computer where it's not just 0 and 1, but all states at once, you become a creator. The Kordylewski clouds, with each dust grain acting like a transistor or a neuron, might possess a form of plasma consciousness. There are ideas out there about plasma bions and cosmic intelligence. Perhaps these clouds are actively guiding certain forces in the solar system. These are ideas you can play with, and I highly recommend researching the work of Robert Temple. His book, A New Science of Heaven, is a fantastic place to start. He talks extensively about the CIA and their involvement in plasma research. He suggests they have done a lot of research that is strictly off limits to the public. This brings us back to the confirm or deny GLOMA response regarding 3I Atlas. If what Temple wrote is true, they probably have a really good understanding of the plasma physics around this object. Maybe they have written this up in classified reports that will never see the light of day. But that is where you and I come in. We can do our own research and figure some of this stuff out ourselves without waiting for permission. This is the main thing I wanted to share with you. Be aware of this coming dust storm. I think it is quite significant, and energetically, it is going to be a volatile 2 months. Now I want to address a few questions that have come up regarding this phenomenon. I will take just 5 points to clarify the situation. First, let's talk about the clumping. These grains have an electromagnetic effect, so they can be more clumped up than you would think. They are not necessarily always dispersing into a fine mist. If the relative velocities are the same before they interact with Earth's atmosphere, they fly in formation. When they have a collision, if the relative velocities are low enough, the collision is inelastic. Their orbits become more similar, leading to a condensation within the stream. We have seen this time and time again with meteor showers. Sometimes we pass through a low-density zone and the show is a dud. Other times, we hit a dense pocket and the sky lights up. This shows there is a non-homogeneous distribution of density within these dust streams. 3I Atlas has been spewing out material like crazy, more so than most comets. It has created a massive trail, and while the nucleus is leaving, the trail is spreading. Because there are electrostatic dynamics involved, the dust could be quite charged up. It starts to hold a structure, becoming a complex, dusty plasma. We could get hit by a whole bunch of complex, dusty plasmoids in March and April. The second point comes from a viewer named Nana, who asks if these streams could interact with Jupiter to create a Big Bang effect. Maybe not a Big Bang or the creation of life instantly, but a burst of ionization is likely. If you have a big enough burst of particles hitting the Jovian atmosphere, it gets interesting. These particle streams accelerate as they fall into a massive object like Jupiter. As they reach higher velocities, they ionize and turn into plasma. It is the EMC quadrate equation in action. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. If the particles are traveling faster and faster, the kinetic energy skyrockets. We could get a significant ionization event from that interaction. Does that create a geomagnetic storm on Jupiter? How does that affect the plasma torus of Io? These are questions mainstream science isn't asking. The third point concerns satellites. Nick asks, what effect might the cloud dust plasma have on satellites? Could this cause Kessler syndrome? That is a fantastic point and a very real danger. There is already a lot of drag on satellites in low Earth orbit. Companies are now moving satellites, like Starlink, even closer to the surface of the Earth. The atmospheric drag there is already greater. If you get this dust storm to create a sudden increase in ionization, you increase the drag. It is just like what happens during a solar storm, but this would be totally out of the blue. Maybe the dynamics are different because these grains are mostly nickel. You get these high-density metallic grains which are magnetic and electrostatic. We could absolutely see satellite problems around that time. If enough satellites fail and start bumping into each other, we have a problem. We have so many up there now that the Kessler syndrome could go into effect. This is the chain reaction where debris creates more debris until orbit is unusable. I don't think we can rule it out. The most likely possibility is that nothing happens, but the risk is non-zero. Fourth comma, Logatha asks, will Earth's magnetic field pull the dust towards us? Yes, we have to consider that aspect seriously. Earth has a powerful magnetic field. If the dust grains are electrostatically charged, they respond to the Lorentz force. The moment they are following the force of electromagnetism versus gravity, the game changes. Electromagnetism is orders of magnitude stronger than gravity. If they latch onto a magnetic field line, they will stick to it or flow down it. It is like a particle flowing into a gravitational well, but accelerated. It is certainly possible that if things get close enough, we could magnetically suck them in. It depends on the charge-to-mass ratio of the grains. Finally, Stephen suggests we should have sent a probe with aerogel to collect samples. That is a brilliant idea, and it is tragic that we didn't do it. We should be as creative as possible in figuring out ways to get data on 3I Atlas. It is only the third ever interstellar object we have confirmed. We saw Oumuamua in 2017, 2I/Borisov in 2019, and now 3I Atlas in 2025. Maybe we won't see another one for 50 years. We have to treat each single one of these objects as a one-off chance to get critical data. The fact that they did not send the Juno probe to do a rendezvous is a mistake. Ideally, we would be doing regular sampling missions of our interstellar dust environment. If we sampled every 6 months, we would have a baseline to compare against. Then, when we pass through the 3i Atlas trail, we would see the unique chemical bump. We don't have enough data to know what is normal and what is alien. The key to understanding our solar system is regular observational monitoring. We need systems online before the event happens. We don't just need telescopes around Earth, we need a Hubble on Mars. When the sun blocks our view, Mars could see it. We need stereo probes around the sun to track sunspots on the far side. We are currently making assessments based on half the data. There are a lot of limitations with our current space science. A lot of people think science is settled and the cosmos is perfectly understood. Far from it. We know very, very little. We should be doing more tests and missions like the one Steven suggested. I would argue that the budget exists, but it is being wasted on bureaucracy. That is it for today's video. I hope you found this informative and valuable. I will be back with more information as I do more research into this anomaly. I do think that we are going to be having some gas, dust and plasma from 3i Atlas interact with Earth. Paul, there is clearly an Earth-Jupiter resonance happening here. It may end up being transformative for us here on Earth, both societally and individually. We are so much more connected to the cosmos than most people think. I recommend you go out there and connect to the night sky yourself. We have an incredible planetary alignment happening right now. Mars and Venus are conjunct, Jupiter is in opposition, and Saturn and Neptune are dancing together. With 3i Atlas nearby, we are having these interstellar cosmic energies vibrate across our entire solar system. In many ways, the solar system is a standing wave of energy. How does that affect us? We are already seeing the effects here on Earth. I will keep you up to date on the madness. Thank you all so much for watching. This is Space Atlas, signing off. Watch the skies.